By day, he's a mild-mannered attorney. By night, he's an even more mild-mannered, middle-aged suburban dad. By weekend, still mild-mannered. Mark, this is dumb. Why do you have me reading this?
Come on, man, just read it. I told you, this is the dramatic intro for my podcast. It's important.
Why do you have me doing it? We're not even that good of friends.
Well, you've got that voice for it. You can bring that gravitas that I'm looking for. Besides, I think this could really be a big opportunity for you. I mean, maybe you'll get discovered. Anyway, would you please just do this already?
Yeah, fine. But once a month.
Well, it might be twice a month.
Huh?
Well, we're still working it out. We're just starting up. It might be twice a month. But anyway, go ahead. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, whatever. Nobody's going to listen to this anyway.
All right, will you please just read what's on the paper? You're killing me here.
Okay. But once a month, when the moon reaches its highest point in the sky and the wild creatures call out in the night, he emerges from a private sanctuary in an undisclosed location outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, arrayed in his priestly vestments, carrying forth the good news that comic books and graphic novels aren't just for kids, that they aren't just masked and spandex superheroes, that storytelling in a graphic format can be so much more. He is the graphic novel apostle.
Intense. That was killer, right?
Yeah, whatever, man. You said Natalie made some pie?
Hey, everyone. My name is Mark Ohrenberger, and I want to welcome you back to episode 2 of the Graphic Novel Apostle podcast. I am so glad to have you here with us today. And for those of you who listened to episode 1, you understand that I'm this guy who just loves comics and graphic novels, consume them every single day, and have so few people in my life that are interested in sharing this hobby and talking to me about these things. But fortunately, I've got a number of friends who are at least kind enough that they'll humor me for maybe one book. And that's what we're doing here. I am trying to spread the good word, trying to be the apostle of these wonderful stories that we hear and see in comic books and graphic novels, and share them with my friends who I hope will enjoy them. This is going to be a very different episode from our first one. For those of you who did listen, with Chad Toppy in our first episode, we covered a book called Spy Superb, which was a comedy book, and we had a terrific time with it. We're going to change pace quite a bit today. We've got my friend Peyton, who is here with us, and I have asked him to read Criminal, Volume 1, which is called Coward. And so we're going to be looking at that first story arc from Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips in the series Criminal that we'll talk a little bit more about in just a second. But I should remind you as well before we get into it that this is going to be a full spoiler podcast. There is not going to be a twist or a turn in the story that we do not cover. If you are afraid of having the story ruined for you, pause right now. We'll wait. We'll be here when you come back after you've procured a copy of Criminal Volume 1, read it, and sat back down and turned your podcast back on. And so for those of you who did that, welcome back. Thank you for being with us. One other thing I want to say before we get started, and that is I'd like for this to be a conversation. And so we'll try and tell you each episode what we're going to look at next time. And if you've got feedback from the past episode we've done, or you want to write in ahead about the book that we're going to do next, please do that. You can find me at graphicnovelapostle@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at graphicnovelapostle. Next episode, we're going to be talking with my friend Jarrett Lillard, and we're going to cover That Texas Blood, Volume 1, by Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips, who's actually the son of the artist that we'll be talking about today. Let's get into it now. Peyton, thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Terrific. The story we're going to cover today is a crime story. It's really a heist story. And those tend to be some of my favorite kind of movies, the ones where you set up a plot. And Ocean's 11 is maybe not the best comparison for this one because it's much more gritty and straightforward than it is the comedy. Maybe it's more along the lines of something like The Italian Job, where you set up this really intricate heist and all the characters are trying to think 2 or 3 steps ahead from each other. Let's talk just a little bit about this series. It was originally published in individual comic book issues back in 2006. And this first volume, Coward, covers issues 1 through 5. They were published on an imprint called Icon, which was actually owned by Marvel Comics. Now, don't be fooled by that. That does not mean that The Silver Surfer is likely to show up any place in the story. He would be very out of character. But at that period of time, apparently, Marvel Comics was giving some of its more high-profile creators an opportunity to do some of their creative, creator-owned stories outside of the regular Marvel universe. And here you have this wonderful team of writer Ed Brubaker and artist Sean Phillips. They're joined on this book by colorist Val Staples. What Peyton has sitting in front of him today is a collected version of that first story arc that's in a trade paperback that was published many years later by Image Comics. And before we talk about Volume 1, Coward, I do want to make just a few comments about this series overall, because I think it's important. There are 7 volumes of Criminal, and Peyton, depending on how this goes, we may see you at least 6 more times, but there are also 2 standalone graphic novels that are part of the Criminal world, we'll call it, but aren't necessarily numbered as separate volumes of the series. And back in 2019, writer Ed Brubaker gave this comment to the publication Deadline, where he was talking about Criminal, and he explained that Criminal tells the interweaving saga of several generations of families tied together by the crimes and murders of the past. And that was something, as I started reading Criminal, that I thought was just really cool. You'll get these minor characters introduced that references that might mean almost nothing to you as we read it here. But then when you pick up Volume 2 or Volume 3, you go, oh, wait a minute. I remember there was a reference to this character, or I know this guy, he showed up in just a couple of panels. And we get some backstories later on, and all of that ends up being a whole lot of fun. I'll try and point out a few of those characters along the way. I should also mention that for those of you who use a library service that subscribes to Hoopla here in the Central Arkansas area, Central Arkansas Library System, it uses Hoopla, and Volume 1 of Criminal was available to download. And so in addition to the physical copy that I pulled off my own shelf, I pulled up the digital copy and looked at that from the library, which was a neat way to go back and forth between the physical and the digital copies as I was going back through this book. So Peyton, we're about to get right into it, and let me ask you this question. Would you ever consider a career in crime?
No.
Just the facts, Peyton.
That would probably be a abrupt change from my current career in law enforcement for over 15 years. Going to crime now might not be the best decision with a family, wife, and kids. Being around seems to be an important part of being a father, but tell me I'm wrong, I don't know. So
fair enough, and we'll see how it works out. Some of these folks in this book actually do have careers in law enforcement and also careers in crime, which I think could be at least something worth considering.
I'd like to stay on the low end to get the people who are in law enforcement and committing crime. I'd like to get them out of law enforcement and keep them on the crime side.
Fair enough. Thanks for having such a great sense of humor about that. Peyton, hey man, before we get into this, what did you think overall? And actually, let me ask a question even before that. Do you have any background in reading comic books or graphic novels, stories in this type of format?
Zero.
Okay. Did you have any interest in reading comic books or graphic novels?
Zero.
Never in your whole life?
It was not something, when you first said this to me, it was just interesting. It never came up. My dad never really talked to me about it. I am a nonfiction guy. That's what I read. And it drives my family crazy because they're all the opposite. They like the fantasy, things like that. Yeah, this is completely out of my wheelhouse, which is fun. I love doing stuff that's different. So it was a change. But no, this is not something I had ever even thought about, even considering like I have the Hoopla account. And so I was like, oh, never once did I think, let's see what the new graphic novels they've got going on there through Hoopla.
I guess we're just different like that, Peyton. You've now tried it. What did you think of this story?
Before we get to the story, I want to point out something that struck myself as I was reading it. I read this. It's short. It's quick. I read this past week, and I had to read it through several times because I find myself not looking at the pictures.
Really?
And I don't know. Like I said, this is my first time. I saw the words. I was reading the words, but I would go through a page, both sides of the page, and I'm a little confused, right? Because I hadn't seen there's additions to it, right? And after going through the first few pages and almost, I would even say halfway through, I was like, okay, I have to train my eyes differently to read this. And it changed. It made it a little bit better. I would say I have a problem when my mother-in-law is in town and we're watching movies. What do we have to do? You have to put on the subtitles so your mother-in-law can hear it because we can't turn that on. I felt a little bit like, because when I watch those and the subtitles on, I'm reading the subtitles rather than listening. And that was the first thing, I guess. That's not story-based, but just different.
Yeah, and it is in some ways story-based because a lot of the storytelling is done with that art.
Yes.
And Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips have been working together for 20 years as a team. I can't recall if I said this earlier, but even if I did, it bears repeating. I think Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips are hands down the best writer-artist team in all of comics. And so that's why I was really excited to introduce this story to you. But you'll see in the very first issue, the very first opening sequence, what they call the prologue in here, if you're just reading the words, you're getting this overview about our main character, Leo Patterson, and who he is. But there's a whole story happening on the page that the words don't directly relate to. You're watching this bank robbery go wrong and a shootout happen, but he's talking about who he is in the panels. That's really neat. As far as also being someone who didn't have previous exposure to this format, did you pick up pretty quickly how to follow panel to panel across the page?
Yeah.
Left to right and down?
Yeah.
That's good. There are different layouts that different artists will use, and that's part of the storytelling too. There are some times where the panel, rectangular box layout is completely ignored, and they use the shapes that they can combine on the page and the areas they can go outside of the panels to tell the story. But you can also look at some comics from, say, 30 or 40 years ago, and sometimes they have to draw arrows for where you're supposed to go next, and literally do draw arrows because it's, okay, this art is just spilling everywhere. What did you think of this art style?
I liked it. I also enjoyed, there was a little bit of a change. They do the dream sequence there at the beginning and change, and I didn't know what to expect because you'd first given it to me, I flipped through it and hadn't really looked. But it's also, when trying to remember the last time I really looked at a comic book years ago, and even you say graphic novel, my first thought is still comic book, right? That's what I still think. And so this was gritty. It was a little authentic, which it played in the same way it played on the maybe a little more violent side. It played on the warmth side with the character. And that's what, I guess that was the first point I noticed, and something that changed. And I noticed when looking at the pictures is the main character, you got that. I felt like, all right, there's a little bit more to this guy, right? Like, he is a criminal, but like you said, you have to see the pictures to know, why is he in this? You talked about it's the family business. It's a little bit of, he was put in a situation. Had he put in any different situation, would he have turned out differently? Because there is something there, redeeming quality that you would see in movies or anything else, but it really shows that when you also look at the pictures in addition to the words. And so I was noticing.
Yeah, and with Leo Patterson, our main character here, there's something about the way his face is drawn, about his eyes, that you really feel a certain sympathy for the guy. And I don't mean a pity, a sympathy where you connect with this character and you realize, the first thing we see him doing is robbing a bank. But at the same time, you're like, there are redeeming qualities about this man. And for as much as this is at its core a crime heist story, there are parts in the middle of this story arc where it turns to a romance story.
Oh, yeah.
And we get this relationship between Leo and Greta, a few characters we'll talk about in a minute, that is fraught. It's got the weight of some past in it, and yet it becomes very tender. And some of the places where they find themselves in dispute felt just extremely real.
Right.
Which I think made for a really cool story too. Let me ask you this. You're looking at this on a page and you've got art. So unlike reading a novel, you are having some of those images not having to be formed in your head, but being presented to you. And then, of course, you're filling in the gaps between what the story does not put on the page. Could you, or what would you think about seeing this in like a live action format?
You can see it, right? Like that, it makes it appear a little bit more. The characters, they're like, some of the first things you notice was, as I'm going back through, like one of the first things I noticed was just hilarious to me was the goatee. Leo has this goatee, And that was the first thing, because as any young man in my late teenage years and early 20s, and the first thing I could grow was a goatee. And seeing that, and I laughed. I audibly laughed when I first saw that. But then it comes out, and there was a joke about it.
Yes.
Later, which goes to my point. If you'd just been reading the words, you wouldn't have picked up on that. That's when seeing that. So that adds to it, because it also, I think, adds a little bit to his character, right? If he had a different look, that gives a little bit more softness, personality to somebody who's got because that's what you're wanting to have. But it stuck out to me right away.
Well, and when you look at Leo, he's also, his age is a little difficult to pin down, but he's not a guy who's growing his first facial hair by any means. In fact, he's got this widow's peak, and his hairline is otherwise starting to recede.
Which also resonates very clearly with me. Yes. I felt that. Yeah, I was like, man, I see what's going on here.
Then he combs his hair straight back, and it hangs long, too. And so it does look like he's trying to cling to some semblance of youth, and maybe he's getting to the point where Travell is in life. Sorry, buddy.
It is. What I saw in it too is, as you start seeing that, it adds to the character in the sense that he's a kid. I think about this when we went to the Travelers game of this year. I'm trying to explain to my daughters that these guys that are playing baseball, they're 20 to 25 years old. They've never grown up, right? Like, they've gone straight from high school to somebody tell them what to do. And I thought about that with this character, because he went straight into, he was a kid, and there's no work you have to go to on a regular basis. There's no like semblance of what we would term adult life. And so it's a little bit of this childish thing, which also endears him, right? He's got this caring compassion that I'm sure I have lost as a cranky 40-something-year-old man, that he does have, that you see, but makes it with his appearance, his comments, how he feels about things. It makes you care for him as it goes on through whatever he's doing. He's doing some terrible things, but you're still, which makes him, okay, I feel bad for this guy.
Yeah. So you mentioned how he had to grow up on his own a little bit and outside of maybe a more traditional upbringing. My dad was a helicopter engineer. This guy's dad was a pickpocket and a criminal, a heist planner. And maybe it was the different sort of upbringing that he had to find his way into this and make his way in the world without a lot of guidance, except guidance on how to be a criminal. So I asked about seeing this in live action. If this were a television show, say on Amazon Prime, would you watch it?
Definitely.
Cool.
Well, especially now, because I've read this, but also I love a heist movie. This is your typical action. It's your typical story. You've seen this kind of plot before. There's differences to it, but I would have definitely, this would be something, even, like I said, I've been in law enforcement for over 15 years. I've watched the NCISs, the CSIs, all those goofy shows. I love it. It's fun to watch everything work out or not work out in the end.
I have great news for you, Peyton. Criminal is in production right now at Amazon MGM Studios. I'm hoping that maybe later this year we'll start to see some episodes. They haven't given a release date yet, but Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips both have executive producer credits on the show. Ed Brubaker apparently has written the pilot episode and is going to be one of the co-showrunner for that show as well. And I guess some of the early episodes are going to be directed by the directors who did that recent movie, The Marvels, for Marvel, which I thought was just a blast of a movie.
So we've already got an idea for our next podcast series, right? We'll just do commentary on the show as it's going on.
Maybe we'll do a watch-along.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If you'll come back after we wrap up here today. And I wouldn't be offering just too much. You may find that I have just bored you to tears, and I hope not. But so overall, you dug the story.
Yes, very good. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was interesting. It had a little bit of a twist from what I thought but it was very good.
Did you find yourself saying, I could read more like this, whether it was the same type of story or just, it was cool seeing the pictures and the words all laid out? Are you going to be picking that up, or are you going straight back to your nonfiction?
I would. I still don't know if this would be something that I would pick up on a regular basis. I find myself, I read this, I was gone for work, and so I was staying in a hotel just by myself. So it made it a little bit easier to pick something up and read without anybody around. But I don't know. I will say, I'm looking at your iPad as you've got it there. That would have been an interesting way. And almost now thinking, you should have sent that to me because I would have just downloaded it and looked at it, just thinking a little bit of the colors and just a little bit differently. But I would not read it, especially because it's something, it doesn't take long to read looking through.
That is something I like about this format, that you can consume an entire story in 3 hours or something like that. And then especially if you learn, oh, wait a minute, there are a bunch of related stories.
Right.
I can get more of this world in individualized chunks. And I like that too. I appreciate you pointing out my failure to send this to you digitally.
Oh, any chance to point out your failure. That's what we're all here for to do.
I know I can count on you for it. Something I did notice, actually, picking this up in a digital format was, I think sometimes when you read something as an individual comic book and then you read it later as a collected graphic novel, sometimes the colors don't pop quite as much in the collected graphic novels. At least that's my perception. And then when I looked at the digital one, I thought, oh man, the colors really pop in the digital format. And I read comics digitally and I read comics in old traditional format. And I like them both. I think they both have their own merits, but that was something that I really noticed as I was going back through Criminal.
And that might be something having to do, like I said, in your 40s, in a hotel room, trying to find the perfect reading light because I'm not in my chair at my house with my lamp that's over my shoulder to look at it. It's a little bit brighter when you see that. And I can zoom in on the words, which this one I had to put a little bit closer to the eyes to see. So,
did you remember to bring your readers with you?
Don't need readers yet. I am really close. That is an ongoing argument in my house, whether our bedside lamps are not bright enough or whether I need reading glasses. That's my wife and I's latest argument.
Surely it's the lighting. No other explanation. Peyton, you're going to be one of those guys that has the glasses that clip together right at the nose piece, aren't you?
No, I'm going to be one of those guys. If you look, they have ones now that you can attach to the back of it's just like a little put on the bridge, but you can slide them on the back of your iPhone. That's what I think I'm going with.
Very fancy.
Yeah.
Not a monocle then.
Now you're just getting me excited. Now maybe I'm getting one just for the fun right there.
Hey, speaking of getting excited, in our last episode with Chad, we talked some about this Wednesday lunch group that a bunch of us participate in, and it is 100% the highlight of my week every week. And a few months back, I was driving from my office to lunch to meet up with you guys, and this particular day, it was just you, me, and Shannon Cooper that were going to get together. And I was thinking on the way over there about this podcast idea that I'd had for a while, and I thought, I don't know how my friends are going to react to this or if they're going to want to do it. And when I started throwing the idea out there to you guys, you and Shannon came alive. You guys lit up like, oh, I'm all for it. And of course, as I'm talking to you now, you're like, I've never had any interest in picking up a comic book in my life. I got home that night and I was telling Natalie about our lunch and talking to you guys about this idea. And I said, Nat, what really surprised me was how enthusiastic Peyton was. I said, not only was he like, oh, I'm in, let's do it, but he even offered like, I can come over and we can do practice episodes and that kind of thing. And Natalie, she didn't hesitate. She had an explanation for this.
Okay.
And let me say this, my wife, Natalie, who is a woman, this was her idea, her theory, not mine.
Okay.
But I'm going to test it out with you. She said, Mark, Peyton lives with 4 women. He's got his wife and 3 daughters who are wonderful. But he doesn't care about your comic book podcast. He wants to get out of the house for a few hours. Is that where we're at?
Today, I want to add, I have one more because my mother-in-law is here this weekend. But I see it differently. I see it as this is something you did as a child, right? This is something you loved and has kept. There are so few things. We both have jobs that are serious. Like we have fun. You and I both talk about we have fun at our jobs. I love my job. You love your job. You're great. But there's something about having this adult life. You're talking about bills. What day is it? It's middle of April. What are we coming up? Tax. And it's these things that you think about. But there's something to go back. In the same way, I've found myself, I read nonfiction. I tell you, one of the last books was a great book. I read about Churchill and when he was down in South Africa and he was fighting the Boer War, Bear War. I'm mispronouncing
I always called it Bior, but I don't know.
Yeah. dub whatever you need to, Travell, to make it sound good. Use whoever's voice sounds best. But I loved it, and it was a great book. But it's serious. There's some funny things, but that's why, same way I just mentioned, I went to the Travelers game. Took my daughters. Me and my three daughters went last weekend. It's fun. There's something about fun. And I reading through this the same way I like watching. This type of book is the same type of TV show and movie I love. I guess that's a difference. What really struck home with my other types of entertainment. You know, I don't really read about it, and maybe that's why, but this is fun. It is just something that's not normal, and I love doing things. We get in our patterns. This is different. So.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're up for it.
Natalie's wrong. Can we just say that? I don't know. Let's make sure she hears this, because I'm sure she's listening, going to listen to all the podcasts.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yeah, I'm not sure why Natalie has this prejudice against women, but whatever. I'll talk to her about it. All right. What do you say we actually talk about the story
Let's
here?
Let's do it.
Issue number 1 opens up in a pattern that we'll see a bunch of different places, often at the beginning of new issues, but sometimes just as part of breaks in the story. We get this solid black panel with just a white word in script, and what we've got here is prologue. And then the first panel we see after that is our first glimpse at Leo Patterson. Of course, we don't know that's his name then, but...
Can I interrupt?
Please.
Just talk?
Yeah.
So walk me through. I found this, you mentioned it, but I want to make sure maybe you're going to talk about this. The black first panel with just... Why that? Why? That seems like a waste of a panel. Is this traditional, or is this just... Because I know... Did they do that in the dream sequence too? Later, where you had a...
They did.
It's almost like a hard out, like you'd see movies, or I can't even remember where, but I think there's another where it just goes to dream sequence for Greta, and it has a panel with just whatever. There it is. Yep, it's right. Greta Dreams. Is there a reason, or is that this style for this guy, or what?
Yeah, that's the very beginning of issue 3, if you were reading the individual comics. And yeah, you've got another one of these all black panels with a white scripted word that just says Greta Dreams.
Yeah.
And that sort of kicks off the action in that. It's just a way to set it off.
Okay.
It's not something that is really terribly common. A lot of times you get one of these rectangular text boxes up like in the upper left-hand corner, or even some script that just sits over some of the art that's outside of a regular text box that'll say, meanwhile, in the jungle, whatever. I don't know. Just a style choice. But so then we get, after that panel that says prologue, we get our first glimpse of Leo Patterson. And we see he's back behind a wall a little bit, peeking around a corner. He's got a concerned look on his face, and he's holding up a mask, like he's pulling it off of his face and lifting it over his head. And we see as we start working through the art that, oh, we're meeting them in the middle of a bank robbery. And it's not going to plan. Some of these guys have pulled guns on the people who are inside. The police have shown up and start kicking in the door. And immediately, as we turn to page 2, we see our man Leo running out a back door and into an alley and just taking off. One of his partners in crime is chasing him out the back door as well, has an angry look on his face like, what are you doing? We got to fight it out with the cops here. And 2 of the other robbers from this team start getting into a gunfight with the cops. And we see that those 2 guys get mowed down pretty quick. We also see the guy who was following Leo out ends up getting shot. And we've got this panel where it just focuses on the guy laying on the ground, bleeding, his shotgun's next to him. And he has this look on his face like, dude, pick me up, save me. And Leo makes eye contact with him and then just turns and runs. And the next thing we see, he was wearing these like white coveralls during the heist, and he's taking them off in an alley, and underneath he's got like a bicyclist's shirt on, and he puts on a hat and sunglasses like a bicyclist would wear, and he's got a bike, and he is riding away, making his escape. Not sticking around to take care of his buddies here. But that's the scene that we're seeing, but it's a little different than the narration that we're getting over the top.
Right.
So we've got Leo telling us, whenever things begin to fall to pieces, I think of my father. And then he recalls about his father and his father's crew, like planning their heist jobs. And he talks about hearing the fear in their voices. that's what he remembers about these heists, is that they understood the danger that they were in when he was a kid. And he talks about how we'd overhear this, me and my friend Ricky Lawless, and then we'd run carefree into the night. We were kids. We had no rules. There are a couple of times this character, Ricky Lawless, gets mentioned throughout. And I point that out because one of the other books in the criminal series, this standalone graphic novel called Cruel Summer, is all about, it's about Ricky Lawless and Leo Patterson as teenagers, basically finding themselves in their first kind of trouble. Right. And so it's neat. We'll see that character come up, and we'll see more of Leo, which you might not expect come the end of this issue, or this story arc. So he tells us, too, that at some point his father got arrested, and he ends up relying on this guy named Ivan, who was his father's partner in crime. And that's when he talks about how he'd started learning these important rules that Ivan taught him, rules of the crime game. And he said, sometimes I tell people about the rules, and they ask what I'm scared of. And I tell them, I'm scared of ending up like my father, scared of dying where I most likely belong, in prison. But the way I see it, if you aren't scared in our line of work, then you just aren't thinking. And I won't work with people who don't use their brains before their bullets. As a rule, at least.
Yeah.
And obviously, he's broken his own rule here.
And this is the, like I said, reading through those first pages, there's so much because it's not exactly congruent between the words that are being written and the pictures. And so if you're reading the words and not saying it is and maybe this is me, I don't know, this is, like I said, the biggest change. If you haven't read graphic novels, you don't pick up on that. Or maybe I did when I was little, but now I've been trying, when you see the pictures, but I don't read that much. And that was the one that kind of goes back through, because you're trying to read, but you see this a little bit. And so it's that trying to develop that character, it's different, right? Like you're trying to figure out, who is this guy? What's the deal here? He's talking about his dad, but then you're trying to figure all these things out. It's interesting how those things don't mesh up, but they do.
That's right. And really where they come together is in the last panel of this prologue sequence, when he says, that's why I've always thought it was so important to follow the rules and not do these things, as a general rule at least. Yeah. And we realize, as you're thinking back on that bank heist, like, oh yeah, Leo broke his own rules here because he's with these guys with guns and people are getting shot, and this is not how he expected this to go.
Yeah. And you love anytime criminals talk about rules. Anytime it makes me laugh. Well, you got to follow the rules. There's another rule, but we've got rules within rules.
Fair enough.
But I just found that one it always makes me chuckle. It's just the honor among thieves type ideology there.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of his set of rules that I think maybe other criminals that he encounters would see him as breaking what they think of as the honor among thieves, because as soon as the heat cranks up, Leo takes off. He's thinking about the exit strategy. And right. We get to the subtitle of this first story arc in Criminal, Coward. And that's because people see this guy as a coward.
Yeah. He's like they all are. That makes other people mad, but you're self-motivated. And this is all about self. It's taking care of yourself in the end, but then it upsets, let's say, people, and that's what you're doing in the first place.
Sure. So we go to the next page, and we get another one of these black panels with the white lettering, and it says 5 years later, the city. So now we've come up to the present time, really. And we've got these two men who are standing in what looks like maybe the gift shop of an art gallery. And they are watching a third guy as he moves through this gallery. And they're talking about him. And one of them obviously knows the guy, knows who he is, and the other one, or knows about him at least, and the other one has no idea. And we learn pretty quickly these are police detectives. We've got Seymour and Jeff. And Seymour is a white guy with white hair. Jeff is a black guy, about the same age probably as Seymour. I'd put these guys in their 50s or so. And they are detectives. They're following who we realize pretty quickly is Leo Patterson through this art gallery. And they're talking about him. And Jeff is saying, I just don't see how you're talking about this guy Leo like he's some master criminal. And Seymour is pointing out he's already made his pickpocketing while you didn't see him at all.
And that was the first thing, that stuff is always interesting. Anybody that could do a pickpocket, that's intimate, right? That's right on top. Being next to somebody, which is adding to the confusion, especially you go back later and you see a guy, Leo, that can care for somebody, but then here's the same guy. He's not just stealing from people. he is stealing from their person, right? Like he's going up there, which I know you get into it, but I did appreciate that talking about identity theft, which is way more of a fraud. That comes up in a few more panels to talk about. He gets where the money's at. It's not just taking the cash and jewelry off these people. Go sell those cards.
Ruff is talking about how he's so unimpressed by this guy that he's seeing. Seymour's telling him, Jeff, he just made you as a cop.
Right.
And we see him like tossing something in a trash can, and I guess Jeff doesn't see this. They go out of the art gallery and into an alley, and Jeff pulls out his badge and stops Leo and starts searching him, and of course finds nothing. And Seymour comes up behind carrying all the evidence of these wallets and things like that. This guy stole. Yeah, and that's where Seymour is talking now. We realize that Seymour and Leo have a history. They know each other.
Right.
And talking very frankly about this guy's crimes. And he's like, Leo, what's the deal? There's almost no cash here. And Leo's explaining, now the real money is in the identity theft. So I'm glad we could get that in there for you. But we realize what's going on now. Seymour's job here is really to make an introduction between Leo and Jeff, because Jeff has a heist planned and he needs Leo in on the job. And Leo's trying to say, man, I am out of this. And we realize that bank robbery that had taken place 5 years earlier, not only was Leo involved in that, but Seymour was actually part of the planning. So we know we got two crooked cops on our hands here.
Right.
And Seymour is telling Leo, like, I think you and I were the only two smart guys on that job.
Right.
And of course, we walked away from it. And Leo is trying to say, look, I'm out of that game. I want nothing to do with it. And he ends up just walking, even though they tell him there's $1 million in diamonds in this score for you. And in fact, we get a little more of the heist idea, which is there is a police evidence van that's going to be transporting these diamonds from the police evidence locker to court. And we're going to take it down. And Jeff has got the inside info on this. And so it's going to be an easy crime. Leo just walks away. No way. Not doing it. Not getting myself back into that world. But as he goes away, you can see, he goes to this train station, he starts pickpocketing people along his way, but he's thinking about it.
Right.
He's mulling it over in his head. This is a nice offer.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Jeff is a hothead.
Right.
Every time we see him, he's blowing up at somebody, usually Leo. But Seymour is telling him, it's okay. I know how we can make this go.
Yeah, I like that. I thought it made me laugh when he's back at, was that the train or the metro or whatever it was, just still pickpocketing. It's like breathing. It is just a second nature to do it. When here's at the same time that push and pull of, I'm going to pickpocket somebody, but I don't know about doing, working with crooked people.
Sure.
You like it, and I get it. It's showing the person here, but it does make me laugh. Those kind of just such stark differences.
Sure. So the next place we see ourselves is back at Leo's apartment. And he's met at the door by a live-in, a home care nurse who is coming out, and he's not even in the door, and she's laying into him like, this guy, Ivan, we learn it's Ivan, is way too much trouble. He's got grabby hands, and he is mistreating me, and there's no way I'm staying around. And Leo's just begging her, please, just stay a couple more days till I can find somebody else. And we learn that Leo doesn't have an option of really being able to put him in some kind of nursing home or something like that because Ivan is a drug addict.
Yes.
He's got a heroin problem, and he can't go someplace where they're not going to give him heroin.
But you're skipping over, though. Ivan is hilarious. Ivan is just here's the drug deal, but at the same time, just thinks he's a ladies' man. He thinks he can talk his way. That was what was cracking me up about him.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to address this. Ivan is a dirty old man.
Yes, 100% he is.
And it's played for laughs here a little bit. And now in part 2, Ivan, we learn, also has Alzheimer's.
Right.
And so he drifts in and out of, Leo thinks that maybe Ivan in some ways thinks of himself as still this young catch of a guy. And so he's always going to be hitting on everybody. But yeah, Ivan has a really charming smile.
Yes.
There are times where he's really light and fun with Leo, but yeah, I guess you don't want to let your guard down around.
Right. He's got that. You can see that. He sees himself as a whatever age, a whole lot younger, half the age. He sees himself as Leo's age, right? And I think one of them, he makes the comment, I think, about the hair. He gives him smart aleck comment, cut your hair, you'll attract too much attention.
And he comments on his goatee as well, like you talked about earlier.
Right. And so I thought that was, it's just a funny thing. Here's this guy still battling his own demons that he's got going on, but seeing himself as a young, he can still take care of anything.
Oh, he still wants to be in the game. There's no doubt about that. So we get a knock at the door. And by the way, I should say, at some point in this, Ivan refers to Leo as Tommy, and Leo tells us that was his dad's name. And so, we are getting a deeper understanding here that there's been a lifelong relationship ever since Leo was a teenager and his dad went off to prison, that Ivan has stood in that breach and been his, for better or worse, his father figure. And now in his declining years, Leo's trying to take care of him. And that's another thing that makes him sympathetic.
Right.
Trying to do the right thing for this guy.
You're setting this up, just showing, here's a guy that's pickpocketing somebody, but taking him back to where he's having to pay whatever. He doesn't have health care. There's no health care for the criminal, but he's taking care of his father figure that somebody's looked up to and costing him a lot of money. But doing that, it's not all almost I don't know, Robin Hood. That's probably too much. I wouldn't say he's that, but taking care of somebody.
That's actually just about what I was about to ask you. Are you saying I've misunderstood Leo? He's really Robin Hood?
No, I'm not. So we care. I can care for him a little bit more. I see the compassion, but no, definitely not.
Fair enough. The next thing that happens is this woman shows up banging on Leo's door, and it's not the home care nurse coming back. It's a woman we've not been introduced to before, but she's yelling at him right away. And he's, what's going on? She says, you remember me? You remember Terry Watson? And the next panel we get is a flashback to Terry Watson, who was that robber from the bank robbery who was dying in the street, looking up to Leo for help at the last moment. And of course, Leo recognizes her. He knows her name is Greta, and she's going to be a major part of the story now. And, he's like, why are you showing up here in my life? What do you want? And I want to be able to take care of my daughter, who doesn't have a dad anymore because of the job that you and him did together, and that I wanted to be in on too and got cut out of. And Leo says, look, I don't work with junkies. And so that's where we learned it. And Greta's upset by this because she's like, I'd been clean for years at this point. But this goes back to Leo's code, his rules. He doesn't work with anybody who's going to be doing that kind of thing. Although, of course, Ivan, I guess, developed his habit much later in life, probably after his criminal career was mostly over. But anyway, she's there because she wants him in on the job that Seymour and Jeff had presented. And she's basically putting it on him like a guilt trip. You owe me. And this can change my family and my young daughter who has medical problems of her own. So he's got his own natural inclination to want to get back into this life. He's now got this guilt trip that's on him, and it works.
Yeah.
So Leo says, against my better judgment, like 2 hours later, he walks away from this conversation. He finds himself at a bar called the Undertow.
Yeah.
And the Undertow is going to be an important hub throughout the entire Criminal series.
Oh, okay.
It is a bar where the criminal element hangs out. And pretty quickly, when he enters, we meet a guy named Gnarly. Gnarly is the bartender. He is standing there. He's a muscled up guy. His arms are just huge, and they're pretty well defined. He's not maybe in his best fighting shape. He's a little bit older now. We see him. He's got one of those white tank tops on, and maybe he's got a little bit of belly to go with those big muscles, but looks like a man of power all the same.
Yeah, this reminded me of also probably a terrible reference, but the bar in Deadpool. This is what I thought of. If you've seen Deadpool, this is where all of them go. It's like you go there when you're looking for whatever assassin or somebody to beat up, Wade Wilson like figures. This is where you're going to the Undertow.
That's right. And Gnarly knows everybody. Leo's saying, I hadn't been in here in years, and Leo just immediately starts talking to him like he had been there at lunch earlier that day. And Gnarly, so Leo starts up this conversation with Gnarly, and he's telling him, like, look, I'm looking for Donnie. And so, in fact, just like in Deadpool, that is why Leo's here. He's not here because he wants a glass of beer. He is here because he wants to find another criminal.
Yeah. And I also point out, when you look at some of these, it's not so far-fetched of people reach out to family. People reach out to the people that close, they know each other. And you see, this is true of everything. The criminal, you think, oh, we're really different. Well, whenever something bad goes on, you may not have talked to somebody in years. You're still reaching out to that somebody that you've known for the longest, may not have talked to. Criminals the same. You need help with something. When you need your car's breaking down, I'm going to call that guy that I knew 10 years ago, and he's going to, hey, I'll come over and help fix your car or whatever that may be.
Sure. And not only, though, is Gnarly the guy who's a connective tissue between all these underworld-type people, and that becomes important here in this story, but in Criminal Volume 3, The Dead and the Dying, we get a whole backstory on Gnarly. He is one of the two main characters of that story, which is really cool, too.
Yeah.
So we'll be spending more time with him in the future. But we find out what Leo wants from Gnarly. He wants to connect with this guy, Donnie. And he gets the information he needs, and he goes and he finds Donnie. Leo meets up with Donnie on this train, and we see Donnie has a con of his own that he likes to do. He gets on a train, he falls down and mimics having a seizure.
Right.
And it turns out he's really epileptic, so he knows what having a seizure is like. And so he falls down, has this big seizure. All the people on the train car or the subway sort of, gather around him and see if he's okay. And as soon as he gets up, he starts telling them, I'm homeless. I got to go to the ER, but they will only accept cash from me because they've seen me before because of this condition. I got to have $95. And of course, people start opening up their wallets.
Right.
He's not just asking them for a handout. He's had this legitimate thing happen, right? But this is his con. And so he gets the money, and then he spots Leo, and he's like, hey, Leo, let's go take a walk. And they're just chatting it up, and it's old times. That reminded me a lot of the movie, oh, crud. One of my all-time favorite movies, and I'm just blanking on the title, but it's Paul Newman and Robert Redford, The Sting.
Oh,
I can't believe it took me all that time.
Yeah.
But where we meet one of the characters early on in that, we're introduced to the character while they're pulling off their own grift.
Right.
That's what we're getting here.
And you love this melting pot of criminals who have their each individual, and I need the guy that, fakes the seizures on the train. I need him help from him and all these other people, that have robbed banks to do this certain heist.
And Leo more or less gives a quick talk to Donnie and, gives him the, we're putting the band back together kind of thing.
Right.
We've got a heist to do.
Right.
And Donnie just looks at him and says, when do we start?
Yeah.
I mean, he's ready. And it's going to be something bigger than getting $95 from people on a subway car, even though he says that works every single time. We're wrapping up issue number 1. And the last scene we get to this diner. And you've got Seymour and Jeff sitting here talking. And Seymour gets the call that, Leo's in. And he tells Jeff, and Jeff's fantastic. I got to go make a call. And Seymour says, you're calling him then? And we don't know who him is. Jeff goes outside. He goes out to a payphone, drops his quarter in, and we see just a hand and a mouth. And this guy picks up the phone and just says, what? And we turn over to the next page, and it is the last page of the issue. We talked with Chadsome about this last week. So a big part of the comic storytelling is the last page reveal or the last page twist that starts pushing our story in the next direction. And man, if you're getting these in individual issues, you got to wait a month to find out what happens next. But we get our first look at this guy who is answering the other end of the phone. We'll learn later that his name is Roy. Roy L.T. is what he goes by. But
I got that, by the way. I caught that.
Oh, good.
The name, yeah.
Well done. But at this point, we don't know anything about him except he's the voice on the other end of a phone. He picks it up, and Jeff is telling him, okay, we got everything in place. Everything's on schedule. This heist is going to go off as it should. And Roy is telling him, it better, or else I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your partners, and I'm going to kill anybody else that gets in the way. And he just hangs up the phone, and he lights a cigarette, and we see a little more of the next panel opens up the room a little bit that he's in, and it's this dark room, and he's got a guy tied to a chair with this gag in his mouth, and his eyes as big as just saucers. And Roy is ready to put a hurting on this guy, so we know he's bad news.
Right. He's also bad news because he has a flip phone and he's still smoking real cigarettes. He doesn't have an iPhone and he has a vape pen.
Now, let's recall, too.
Oh, I know.
This comes out in 2006. We also saw Jeff make a call on a payphone.
Yes.
Which I wonder if, one of your daughters, and I realize you're probably not going to let your daughters read criminal, but let's say you did for just a second. I imagine maybe the most confusing thing in this whole first issue for them would be that payphone that Jeff is plugging his...
We were down in Texas on a trip, and we stopped there, and my youngest sat there and acted like she was talking on a payphone for minutes, which was great and kept her busy. But that's the thing I was noticing as he throws the flip phone, although that means criminal. If you have a flip phone still today, When you're smoking real cigarettes, that's a criminal because everybody else has got an iPhone and a vape pen, so they're ready to go.
Good point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Or beeper. I remember seeing a pager in this. That's the other thing.
Sure. So we open issue number 2, and we get another one of these black boxes, and the script tells us it's 4 days later. So we meet Leo and Seymour, and they're sitting in a car together, and they're on they look like police partners on a stakeout.
Right.
And we learn that what they are doing, in fact, is staking out this police evidence van. They've been watching its route every single day. And Seymour is frustrated. He's tired of this. He's like, yeah, it's the same route every day, dude. We know how it works. Why are we doing this? But we know that Leo is the intricate planner, which is also a hard thing to reconcile because he's this small-time pickpocket most of the time. But he also has the potential to basically be a criminal and set up these heists because it's what he knows. He's grown up since he was a child being around this stuff. But because of his cowardice, basically, he doesn't want to go for those big scores. He wants to do what's safe.
Yeah.
But anyway, he is in this big score now, and he's going to play it safe. And so he's going to make sure he's checked and double-checked everything. Here we are on this 4th day, and the evidence van comes down the street just as planned, except something a little different happens this time. There is a broken-down car that's stopped in the middle of the lane, and there's a guy standing out front looking like he's working on the engine, and the police officer's yelling at him like, get your car out of the lane, and he's like, look, it's broken down, what do you want? And we realize pretty quickly, that's Donnie.
Right.
And Donnie is the one who's standing there with this broken car, and we see what happens. Well, exactly what Leo wanted. The evidence van has to make a detour, and it drives off into this tunnel. And so everybody knows that the best place to rob like an armored car is in a tunnel, right?
Yeah, everybody's seen The Italian Job. You've got to put a car breakdown right there to turn them where you want to go.
Oh, 100%. And we also know that it's coming through at like basically rush hour time.
Yeah.
We know that everything's going to be a go for this heist. And we go now to some kind of like parking garage or warehouse or something like that where you have, and this is a classic heist scene too, you've got the meetup of all the people in the gang, and they're talking through what's going to happen. And we've got 2 sides, one of them represented by Leo and one by Jeff, and they are furious at each other. Jeff is like, who is this other guy, referring to Donnie, that you're bringing in here? And he's got another guy in the background, a redheaded guy we'll learn pretty soon. His name is Red. Just a good name.
Yeah.
I guess his parents decided that was the best name for him.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's his given name. Anyway, we've got the other side here now represented by Jeff, and he's got these 2 other guys in suits that look like they've had about enough of this going on with their day. We get the pretty classic fed-up police detective character here in these 2 guys. And so Jeff is mad that Leo's trying to bring in other guys. Leo's mad that Jeff's trying to bring in other guys. It nearly comes to blows. And eventually Seymour plays the peacemaker a little bit and says, guys, there's too much on the line here for us to be fighting with each other. And so they get whatever peace there's going to be. And we've got Greta here too, by the way. She's going to be part of the heist team. And Leo starts laying it out. And of course we get him here saying, all right, it all starts with the car breakdown. So we get through this bit of planning, and finally it looks like everybody is on the same page. And the next thing we hear from Leo is, and by the way, there will be no guns. And Jeff's all upset about this. Right. He's heard about this. Right. It's one of the rules. And he's, what do you mean no guns? We're going up against armed police officers. And Leo's explaining, look, my way or the highway. You want this plan? That's going to be the rule. There are no guns. We are not going to end up on death row over some heist that got blown because you guys, I think he says something like saw too many Dirty Harry movies or something along those lines. And so sure enough, it's going to go forward. Everybody agrees, fine, that's what we're going to do. Leo leaves, and we see that Greta is tracking him down. And Greta says, whoa, Leo, hold up. And she pulls him aside, and she says, you know these guys are going to try and double-cross us, right? And Leo's, yeah, of course these guys are going to double-cross us. And she's like, we got to be ready for that. Leo's trying to figure out, like, since when are we on the same team here? You forced me into this job. And that's when she starts talking about her daughter, Angie, and she's, I have to have this score. I can't let these guys rob us at the end of it. My daughter is got this medical condition. Come on, man. And Leo agrees, and he's, all right, fine, we're in it together. Yes, we're going to do this heist, and yes, we're going to have a plan for when these guys eventually double cross us.
And I just, you got to think Leo through this whole thing is he gives the no guns, he gives the my way or the highway, he gives this as the plan. It's it's that doublespeak's not the right, but he's saying this knowing full that's going to make them think, okay, we can't deal with this guy. He's a coward. But he's thinking, hey, I want to get you guys. I want you thinking that way because this is what everybody thinks, just to keep up, his persona, right? He's doing this. And that a little bit of that.
That's right. Very crafty. He's leaning into this idea that he's the one who's going to be the sort of the coward, the wet blanket on the job.
Yeah, he's the wimp, right? You'd rather be, you don't want people thinking you're the big bully and you're the one that we've got to go through and take care of first.
Yeah.
They're not worried about him. He can't think of anything else.
Well, and we also get this idea in this conversation with Greta that Leo understands there's an element of theater here.
Right.
Like, yeah, we're going to have this big near come to blows fight over whether they're going to be guns on the job. But yeah, of course, we know these guys are going to show up with guns,
Yeah.
So now we get a couple of pages further and we get to another one of our black boxes and the word just tells us the job. This is where, reading back through this, and I've read this story several times, but reading back through this, I'm like, oh, this is where it really kicks into high gear. And I'm like, it gets all those wheels churning. And I start thinking about how the heist plays out in the Italian Job or in Ocean's 11 or whatever. I
love the roles. I love like on any sitcom, you like the roles of people that are, they all have their part to play, right? You've got all these people and you need the guy that's yelling. You need the cop that's gone bad, the cop that knows them for a while, the new cops that came in. You've got the epileptic, you've got the female. I love and thinking just like a baseball team, a basketball team, everybody's got to play their spot. Everybody's got to do it. Just, all right, I'm fine. I'm the epileptic on the big heist. Or I'm the one that's going to have the hood up. It's you start seeing that. And that's what I love. It's those actors that are bit actors in movies. They've got a small role. That's who they are. Character actors. That's what I was trying to say. That's what these guys are. And I will say this, I always appreciate people who no, this is... But so I see these guys, you appreciate, they know that's their job to do. Because everybody wants to be the Leo, but I'm not. I don't have the cool goatee. I don't have the long hair. Sometimes you got to have that. So they're all like, yep, I'm going to do my little part in this criminal heist, but do that.
And Peyton, for any listeners who know you in real life, yeah, they know you don't have the long hair. Yeah, so we get into what these roles are. And so, and of course, Leo has orchestrated everything. The first thing that we learn is he has had Donnie earlier in the day go and plant this suspicious package at a deli that's known to be a favorite lunch spot for some of the city's big shots. And so he knows that when a bomb scare gets called in on this package that's left at the deli, it's going to be like half the police force is running to the opposite side of town.
I appreciate them not using donut shop, right? Like that would have been the first. I was like, okay, I get what's going on here.
By the way, I should tell you this, Peyton, when I was trying to entice you to drive over here to Sherwood and participate in this podcast, we told you there'd be donuts. That wasn't a law enforcement joke.
As I said, I'll take donuts no matter what. I like it. That's always great.
Oh, good. So the next thing we know is that Seymour is going to be the quarterback of this job. He's going to be the guy in the chair who's keeping his watch on everything and using the radio signals to call out the times. And in fact, one of his jobs is going to be to call in this bomb scare and get all of the police in the city going toward the deli instead of where their heist is about to take place. The next thing we see is that the evidence van gets to the place where they've got the broken down car, just like we had the other day, and as expected, it detours into the tunnel. But it was a different crew. It was Greta and Red this time who were outside of the broken down car, and Leo and Donnie have already made their way into the tunnel inside another car. So they place themselves right in front of the evidence van. And then after the evidence van had passed Greta and Red, they jump back in the car that they had staged as if it was broken down, and they end up being the car that is behind the evidence van. So we've got these guys pinned in already. And at some point, traffic is pretty well stopped, and part of that is because there's another car that is broken down inside the tunnel, conveniently, because we know it had been placed there earlier in the day by Leo as well. So it's slowed down traffic basically to a stop. And all of a sudden, Leo jumps out of the car, and he starts yelling for help. And he says his friend Donnie is having a seizure. And so Donnie's getting to do his seizure routine, and he's fallen out on the floor. And the two police officers look at each other, and Leo's looking up at them and yelling, "You guys are cops. You're first responders. Get out here and help my friend. He's going to die." And so one of the officers, the driver, is, "Okay, just go help this guy. We're not going anywhere. Traffic's dead." And so he gets out and he crouches down over Donnie, who's having this seizure, and Leo gets out a taser from behind and puts the officer down. Of course, the driver sees this, and he jumps out of the car, and he starts running over to make this police stop. And that's when Greta and Red have gotten out of their own car, and they hit him with a taser from behind. So the only two cops that are there are down.
Yeah.
And that's when Greta and Red go into the back of the evidence van, and they start looking around. But you hear them over the radio saying at this point, hey, guys, there's something wrong with this briefcase that all the diamonds are supposed to be in. And we've learned by now, by the way, that $1 million in diamonds, that was going to be Leo's cut. Altogether, we're talking about $5 million in blood diamonds that were going to be used in evidence in this trial. We're hearing from Greta now, there's something wrong with this, but we don't know what. And about that same time, we turn around and we discover that Jeff is there. And he's pulled out a gun, and he's yelling like, freeze, police. He's going to be the police officer. And this is the twist in the heist that, of course, Leo was not, had not made part of his plan. And Jeff shoots Donnie and kills him. And so Leo starts freaking out, and these two other cops jump out, and they start shooting at these guys as well. And so we've got this whole shootout going on. Red gets killed in the process. But Leo says one of the other rules, maybe the only rule that I didn't break in this heist, is never just have one way out.
Right.
So he had accounted for this, this betrayal. And so Greta gets shot in the stomach, but he grabs her up, he picks her up, she's got that briefcase, and they jump in that car together that was supposed to be the abandoned car in the tunnel. And they've intentionally chosen a small compact car for that, one that police officers can't chase.
I like that. That was one of the things that of all that, I was like, that's a good little add-in to the whole thing.
Yeah, because he ends up disappearing down this aisle, and he's like, a police cruiser won't fit down this, not aisle, but alleyway, once he gets out of the tunnel. And as they're driving off, and we're getting to the very end of the issue here, Greta is telling Leo, like, there is something wrong. This case is too heavy. And they open it up as they're driving away from the scene of the heist, and it's not diamonds. What do we got?
Drugs.
We got smack.
Smack.
I think we learn later it's 32 kilos worth of heroin, uncut, that's there. And so Leo's, oh, no. This was the one thing that I didn't account for, that the heist, or that the score wouldn't be what I thought the score was. Because you got to imagine, he's already got like a fence set up for diamonds. So that wraps up issue 2, and we get into issue 3, and it starts with Greta Dreams, which you mentioned a minute ago. Last we saw Greta, she is in a bad way. Mm-hmm. She's been shot in the stomach, and she's bleeding out, and she's thinking about her daughter in this dream. And she sees this big kind of spider, which of course represents terror to her. And she wakes up, and you can think of this as like a fever dream.
Right.
And she discovers she's in a bed in a place that she does not recognize. And Leo comes in pretty fast because she starts yelling. And he tells her, yeah, you've been out for 2 days. And basically, I had somebody that I knew that was like a Vietnam field medic come in and stitch you up. So,
which I thought that was interesting because it just adds the fact that all of Leo's people all his buddies are all like these old guys, right?
True.
Like all of his dad's buddies. Like he's just this guy, he's still a kid in a sense. He's just been, because usually right in the movies we had a vet. We had an animal vet that came in and stitched you up, so it wouldn't go on there. But that's what I was thinking when we had the Vietnam field surgeon. I was like, of course, it's somebody else's dad knew from back in the day, or Ivan or somebody.
Yeah, for sure. We'll learn later that where they are is at this safe house that's out in the country that is off the grid that Leo's family owned, but it had never been in his dad's name, and they think nobody knows it. Next thing we see, we switch scenes, and now we're back with Roy LT and his guys who are holding Jeff and one of those police officers in place, and they're punching out this other officer, and Jeff is protesting, yelling like, Roy, don't do this. And we get a picture of Roy now, and he is sitting on like a raised platform, and they're in a warehouse or something, but he's on kind of a raised platform in an armchair, and he's got a gun. And sitting in this armchair, it looks like a throne.
Right.
And that imagery is obviously pretty on the nose, but it works really well. He starts stepping down these steps off of his platform, and he says, I'm going to be the king of this city, basically. Right. And he wants to show Jeff that he means business about all this, because, great, maybe you succeeded in getting a character we're going to meet in a second named Delron. Maybe you succeeded in getting Delron out of prison, because the evidence didn't show up for his trial. but you didn't get my heroin back.
Right.
And to show how serious he is, he turns to this other officer who'd been in on the heist, and he shoots him in the head.
Yep.
And, of course, Jeff is panic, just freaking out at this point. And he's, I am going to get your drugs back. And Royale is, yeah, no kidding, you're going to get my drugs back.
Right.
And by the way, now that my lieutenant, Delron, is back from prison, he's going to be going along with you to make sure. He's going to be my eyes, Royale tells him. And Jeff is not happy about this either, because that guy's a psycho. We end up meeting Delron here in a couple of pages, and Delron looks to me like John Candy in a bolo tie. Is that?
Yeah.
And he looks a little goofy. He's obviously got a big body. He's pretty rotund. I mean, he doesn't look toned or anything like that. And he's wearing this terrible bolo tie and silly hat. And you would pick him as just like this redneck country guy. But man, he's ruthless. And we're going to learn all about that for pretty fast. But we jump back for just a second to Leo and Greta out at the safe house. And Greta wants to call her mom to, let him know that she's going to be okay. And Leo's, there's no way. Yeah, of course your mom's going to be mad because she's got Angie and she doesn't know if you're dead or what. But better off for everybody if people think you're dead. If you start calling back, like, that's trouble. And Greta can't understand it. But Leo says, look, you stay here. I've got to go take care of something. And sure enough, Leo drives out to this, I don't know, whatever, gas station or something in the middle of nowhere. And he meets up with Gnarly. And Gnarly is delivering Ivan to him and saying, all right, here's Ivan. Here's his heroin kit. And man, good luck. You got to take care of him. And Leo says, hey, Gnarly, put the word out that Greta's already dead, that she didn't survive that gunshot, to maybe take some heat off her. And Gnarly's, no problem. I got it. Gnarly's a guy who's good to know, I think. We go back to the safe house, and Greta meets Ivan, and she's pretty charmed by him, even though he's doing his dirty old man thing.
She's got the iconic, I've just been shot, and then of course I'm wearing a businessman's button-up t-shirt, or not t-shirt, business white shirt that is like every movie you've ever seen right there, which, because all criminals still probably have their dress shirt that they have going on. I thought that was funny.
Sunday's going to come around eventually. They got to be ready to go to church. So he's got his dress shirt, that's for sure. What is alarming to Greta about this, though, is overhearing a conversation between Ivan and Leo where she realizes, oh man, Ivan is a drug user and I can't be around that. I can't have either the drugs that we stole or the drugs that are part of Ivan's kit. And she basically just tells him, Leo, just hide this stuff from me so I cannot find it, because I don't want to end up going back to this. And he promises he's gonna do that. So the next thing we see that is over the next couple of days, Leo and Greta just being around each other, and they're in isolation. They realize they have a lot in common. They like each other, and they're really starting to fall in love. And in fact, that ends up becoming a problem, because while it is making Leo and Greta both very happy, they're enjoying themselves together, it distracts Leo from taking care of Ivan. And that's a problem, because Ivan is creeping around the house when he can't find where Leo is, because he's off with Greta. And he finds the score, and we see his eyes light up big. He says, bingo! And they say, I'm losing it. And he's carrying off this briefcase just full of uncut heroin. And he says, whoa, jackpot. We know that's not going to go well, I'm sure. The last thing we see, we get our last page twist in the story, is that back in the city, Delron and Jeff show up on the doorstep of Greta's mother and basically say, we're the police. We need to talk to you for a minute. And we know that's not going to go well either.
Yeah. Which you made mention of this earlier, but Delron, just by the looks of him, he's a criminal. Who's going to open the door for somebody like that? There's no way. He's standing next to a guy with the bad, corrupt cop. I still don't care. No, there's no way this guy's, he may be a Louisiana running for public office somewhere. That's what I took Huey Lewis, the old... Long. Not Huey Lewis, not the singer of the Huey Lewis News.
Addicted to Love, right?
Yeah, but...
No, that was Robert Palmer. Oh, man.
But that's what I love, yeah. It's this guy. He has to be a criminal. It looks like that when he's leaning into it.
Death. So we get into issue 4, and we've got Leo reflecting on how he's finally feeling like at peace, that he's found some happiness here with Greta. But pretty quickly he realizes that was not probably what he needed, because he walks down the hall, he's looking around for Ivan, and he discovers the briefcase, and it's open, and there's one of the kilos of cocaine, or of heroin rather, is missing. And he goes into the bathroom, and he finds Ivan dead on the floor. And we get a really beautiful series of panels where Leo just yells no, and he collapses onto a door basically, and then he is just sitting balled up, crying basically on the floor. And this is where Leo's mad at himself, and he starts to freak out at Greta a little bit too, because I think he blames her some for the fact that he was distracted and this happened. He goes and he buries Leo outside, and while he does, he's reflecting back on all those points in his life where Leo was so important. Leo teaching him to pickpocket at age 8. Leo being there when... Ivan being there when Leo's a teenager, and Leo's dad being taken away in handcuffs. And basically, this was his father, and he's dead now.
Yeah, you got a guy that's only taking care of one person, right? Ivan's the only person, and I finally let somebody else, is a guy that pickpockets on his own, does all these small-time grifts on his own, not dealing with anybody, and then the second he allows one more person, here he is realizing, all right, I've screwed up. I've done that. I think that's seeing stuff like that, it's just this is a good reflection. Like, in some ways, graphic novels, you think this is just this far-fetched, right? Mm-hmm. This isn't but people are dealing with this all the time, right? They're too scared. You don't want to realize you get married. You've got more responsibility. You don't want to have kids, but then you have kids and just thinking, I can't handle all this. And that's what most people, you would think, if you had asked a lot of people, what do they want to do? Not be responsible for anybody. And that's it. We have to do this. But with that responsibility comes things that happen, no fault of your own. Don't fault him for being put in this situation. But that's where I will say that was one of the things that I did not expect. You think graphic novels, and like I said, I think comic books, and I still think not reality. But there is a huge dose of reality in these kind of far-fetched heists, the humanity. I guess humanity is a better way of putting that.
Yeah, we get some really cool interpersonal stuff here. And in Leo's reaction to this as well, because Greta comes out and she's trying to comfort Leo.
Right.
And she's saying to him, like, look, this isn't your fault. Yeah, you were distracted. You didn't make him choose to use heroin. And of course, she, as a user herself, is, look, this is nobody's fault but Ivan's. And Leo really lashes out at her. And this is where we get back to that coward trope as well, because he didn't want the responsibility. He had the responsibility. He lost it. And he's got to get out of there as fast as he can. And so he takes the briefcase of drugs and he puts it in the trunk of his car and he storms off and just leaves Greta there, actually, and says, look, I'm going to go just fix this. This has gone on long enough.
And you get that feeling. This is when you can feel the change, right? You see what's coming, but something's happened in that life event that's happened. It's changed. Sometimes it's getting that punch in the face from an event or getting called a coward by the only girl you've ever loved. Damn.
Well, and we're going to see a side of Leo starting now that we didn't before.
Yeah, you see it coming.
So we learn pretty quickly, too, that meanwhile, back at Greta's mom's house, Delron and Jeff have killed the mom, and they've got Angie, the daughter, tied up. She's got like duct tape over her mouth and around her hands. And Greta, now that Leo's not there anymore, she's freaking out. She discovers there's some drugs left in the house too, and she doesn't want to give in. And she calls her mom. Her mom's not picking up because she's dead on the floor. But she starts leaving a voice message on the old school answering machine. And meanwhile, we see that Jeff's got a computer and he's tracing the call. And so now he says, okay, we know where they are. They take a Polaroid shot of Delron, who's got blood all over his shirt, holding a crying Angie, and they're going to be able to use this as leverage too. Meanwhile, Leo has gone back into the city, and we meet a new character, a woman by the name of Jenny, and we learned that Jenny's parents were part of this heist crew that Leo's parents had been part of as well. And they're reconnecting, except Jenny has gone a different path in life. She's a police detective. And not only that, but she's internal affairs. And so they're going to sit down and have a conversation, and we're going to get some additional information about who Royale is and who it is that Leo, because to this point, he doesn't know who's actually behind all of this and what's actually going on. And they start talking about Jeff, and they're like, we've known forever he's dirty, but we hadn't known how to hang anything on him. And that's when the story kind of all starts clicking into place, like how he had been set up. And something else that Jenny tells him here is, yeah, you were the perfect person for this job, not because you're such a master crime planner, but because they knew that as soon as guns came out and people started getting shot, that you would flee and that you would escape. And what Jeff needed was for the drugs that had come out of that evidence van to disappear so that they could be delivered back to Royale. And when civilians saw you running away from the scene of the crime, they would just assume that the drugs were gone too and nobody would come around looking for it. And in a sense, you were a dupe all along. And that's a hard pill for Leo to swallow.
Which, by the way, I just want to add one more time. He gets another made fun of his goatee by the Internal Affairs. I picked up on that several times, but this is another one of those times that they did that there. I don't know. I wonder if if Sean has a thing against the goatee, or Ed didn't want it, and so this is his way. What the combination is there?
Yeah, it could be. Maybe there's something between the writer and artist here about that.
But yeah, it is very much like that character that's putting your main character, putting the mirror up to them and letting them know, like, you're an idiot. You think you've got it, but there's a reason you have people around. I tell people there's a reason you're married is because then the things you excuse me. The reason you stay that you're married is you have somebody they can say something to, and then they tell you, don't ever repeat that to anybody else. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. But here we have Leo that doesn't have that person. He has to go back to his buddy, to his friend from back home. So.
It's true. And for as much as I love Natalie with all my heart, that may be the great failing in our marriage, is that she's like, yeah, Mark, go ahead, do your comic book podcast. She doesn't tell me enough. Yeah, keep that one to yourself.
Yeah, it's that person that tells you something's crazy or encouraging you things just to get it out of your system. Maybe that's part of it here. So.
Yeah. We come to the very last page of this issue 4, and it's Greta. She's back at this safe house out in the country, and she sees headlights coming up, and she's, oh, thank God, this is going to be Leo coming back, and everything's going to be okay. But we learn, oh no, it ain't Leo. This is Seymour, Jeff, and Delron, and they've got a gun, and things are going to be bad. All right, this turns us into issue number 5, and we start out with our black box again, and the script just tells us, too late. At the very end of issue 4, Leo had gone to Seymour's apartment, and he had overheard a voice message on the answering machine as well from Jeff saying, hey, we found out where they're staying. We know the safe house. We got to get out there right now. And so Leo realizes, oh man, I got to get out there, and I'm going to speed as fast as I can to get back to this house. And maybe it won't be too late, but he knows it is the second he walks in the door. And he looks down and he finds Greta dead on the floor in a pool of blood. And of course he just drops to his knees and he's, what did I do? What happened here? He sees Greta lying there on the floor and he's just crumbles. And about that time he hears a voice from behind him, and it's Seymour. And Seymour's there with a gun, and he's holding up a picture of, it's that Polaroid of Delron holding Angie all tied up, and is basically saying, I've got leverage on you. You may think your world is falling apart, but this little girl dies if you don't get those drugs back to us. And so what choice does he have at this point? So Leo goes back out, and he's going to go to the car. They're walking out, and of course he's walking. Another very cinematic sort of thing where Leo's walking and the man with the gun is walking behind him, pointing at it the whole time. And they're not face to face, but they're talking. And Leo starts telling a story as he's walking back toward this car. And the story that he's telling is about his father, who was put into prison for killing Teague Lawless, father of Ricky Lawless. And he starts telling him, my dad didn't kill Teague Lawless. And it seems like this is coming out of nowhere. He says, if my dad had killed Teague Lawless, and he deserved it, but my dad would have planned it, and he would have gotten away with it, and that never would have happened. And Seymour at this point is saying, what, you expect me to believe that you're the one who killed Teague Lawless? And this story distracts Seymour just enough that Leo, who has now gotten to the trunk of the car and opened up this briefcase, is able to slit open one of those kilos of heroin, and he tells him, "It was me." And he turns around and he throws the heroin all in Seymour's face. And Seymour he's coughing. He can't understand what's going on. And this is such a cool emotional moment. This is where Leo tells us, yeah, people think I'm a coward. They've always said that about me. But let me tell you what I've actually always been afraid of. I've been afraid of what's inside of me. And he says this as he is shooting Seymour right between the eyes. And so, yeah, there was more to Leo than we knew.
Yeah, this is that final, you're leading up to that precipice. This is it. He jumped. Now he's all in. He's in the deep end, and he's ready to go. I love that part of it.
That's right. And he's going to leave nothing breathing in his wake after this point.
He's gone full Liam Neeson now. We've moved over from weak whatever actor to Liam Neeson.
Yeah, it turns out that Leo has a very particular set of skills.
Yes.
He finds a motel key on Seymour's body, so he knows now where Delron and Angie are, and probably Jeff. And he goes back there and he gets in a fight with Delron, and man, he basically pickpockets Delron for his knife and just slices every artery this guy's got. Yeah. And he, of course, in the process also gets himself stabbed in the chest or the belly, and he's bleeding out. But he rescues Angie and he takes her and he's, look, I'm a friend of your mom's. Let's go. We're going to go someplace safe. And he goes and he takes Angie and delivers her to Gnarly.
Yeah. Who's the best babysitter? A bartender. I guess they've been babysitting drunk guys. A drunk guy versus a 10-year-old kid. There's no difference right there.
There you go. Now, Leo, who's in a pretty bad state by the time he gets to Gnarly's bar, gets himself all patched up as well. And he goes into the lost and found room, which we know is just full of contraband that Gnarly has taken off of the bad character.
This is also where it made such a Deadpool reference to me, because I just imagine they've got all these ridiculous things just on the backside of the bar, because that's what these trained assassins, I left my machine gun or mace or whatever it may be, throwing stars.
Yeah, at the very least, we know there's an Uzi there, because that's what Leo selects. And so he leaves Gnarly's bar, and Leo goes and he drops off this briefcase full of drugs into the front seat of Jeff's car and leaves a note basically that says, look, here are the drugs back. This is a way that Leo has to follow Jeff back to Royale's hideout, because he doesn't know where to find Royale. And sure enough, it works. He follows him back to where Royale has his base set up, and he makes his way past the security that's outside, and he goes in and he sees Royale and Jeff having a confrontation. And basically, Leo just comes in guns blazing.
Yeah. Point out, though, here, what was his comment? I just said when he followed Jeff, and I know we're moving. What was his comment about finding Jeff? It had something to do with, even though he's committing crime, he's still got to go work his normal hours or something like that. There was a comment about there. He's a police officer, but he's still got to go to work.
He says he's still got to punch the clock every once in a while.
That's it. Yeah, I was like, that's hilarious. Where's he found? We'll just go find him. But yeah, takes him right back.
Sure. So we get into this shootout, and Leo kills Royale. So the king of the city's crime is dead. Long live the king. The security guards start getting shot up. Leo is getting shot up at this point. And basically we're left where Leo is down on the ground. He's got bullet holes in him. Of course, he had been stabbed previously. And the last man standing really is Jeff. And Jeff is, man, you just saved my life by doing that, you moron. Jeff makes his way over to his police car, and he starts to call in on the radio, for backup. Man, I'm in an officer down kind of situation. Get here quick. And so we know cops are going to be coming, and in that moment, he turns back around to look at Leo, who I think he had assumed was dead.
Right.
And Leo's got a gun, and Leo shoots him through the chest twice. And we see now Jeff is dead. Leo is dying right here in the street, and he's saying, killing was always a lot easier for me than dying, and I just want to be dead by the time those police officers show up. And then in the very last panel, the police officer is there, and he's still alive, and he says, just my luck.
Yep.
So that's the end of our story.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether Leo has survived this or not, whether Leo's going to come back later in prison or whether his story is over.
Yeah. One of the things, too, I was noticing, just going back, the comic strip kind of, I love some of these things. I think that's what makes this good, is that connection. Whereas you're reading this as I'm reading this all at once, whereas if you're reading it, like you said, volume by volume or series by series, you see that connection. You think more back to it, like that little comic strip, which is the comic strip within the comic, that was that interesting connection, the sub story or kind of the allegory, allusion, whatever, to that. I thought that was an interesting thing throughout there.
I never knew quite what to make of that. And so several times throughout these issues, you have a picture of a newspaper and we see a bit of like a private eye sort of comic strip, like a Dick Tracy type. And at some point, Leo makes the comment that he never could understand what this was all about even. And it seemed nonsensical to me too. Did you end up drawing any meaning out of what was actually going on?
Well, I tried to. I saw the connection, but trying to see it and just that last one, it had one thing. What was it that it said in there? She has to be alive. That's one thing I took on that there had to be something there to him, but it was interesting.
Who knows? Maybe we'll see more of our friend Leo Patterson in the future. So as we wrap this up, man, what did you think overall?
It was good. I love the storyline. It's very much, especially you referencing and knowing you can see this as a series. You can see that little bit when keeping the people going and all the different characters that come in place. It's like the Marvel movies, DC comic, all these things. You've got universes, you've got people being pulled in, and then we tease out different stories. Of these individuals at what makes them and gives their character a little more backstory, which is always fun when you hear clips about one person and then you go hear their whole story later on. Oh, that's neat on how that plays into it. That's always interesting. But I love the idea this guy's conflicted. He's got his own rules. He's dealing in a world where he's breaking the rules all the time. It's a classic hero bad guy motif there.
So what do you think? You coming back for volume 2?
I would read it. Am I going out to actively purchase it? No, but it's one of those that's there. I would be interested. Movies come out or TV series, I'll definitely be looking forward to that. That would be fun to do.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm really happy we got to sit down, and I'm glad I got to just share a story with you.
Yeah, it was really good.
So thank you. And for all of our listeners, man, let us know what you guys think as well. Come find us at graphicnovelapostle@gmail.com or at our Instagram account @graphicnovelapostle. And thank you for joining us today.